In this tutorial, we are going to create a calendar event using Google Apps Scripts with the Calendar App class. A couple of caveats before we begin. If you want to go into detail and create more fine-tuned events, then I would recommend the Calendar API over the Calendar App class. And just for the simplicity of this tutorial, we are assuming that the time zones for your Google Apps Script are the same as your calendar. Let's dive in. Okay, so go in and create a new standalone Google Apps Script project. And we're going to change the my function here, and we're going to call that add calendar event. Cool. So the first thing we need to do is create some variables. So let's just make a note here to say this is our variables area in our function. And you might put your variables in another function to call this function. It's totally up to you, but this is easy for the tutorial. And at its very basics, the calendar event only requires three things. The first one is the title, the start date, and then the end date of your calendar event. So let's make our first variable at the top here. It's a constant variable, so it's not going to change. We'll say const title. And let's make that equal to our event name. So that's going to be integrating the PAX calendar globally. And definitely an uber nerd title there. A 13-month, 28-day calendar. I have just corrected my glasses. Okay, so the next constant variable is going to be our start date. And in some cases, you might be getting a start date from a variety of sources. So you might get it from a Google form or get it automatically from some other resource that you are working with. But in the end, our calendar event requires us to have our date set as JavaScript date objects. So let's create our date object and start with our new date constructor. And there's a number of ways that you can create a date using the JavaScript new date constructor. And you can see them here. But we're going to use the one that's probably the most accurate here, and that's by adding in each of the items as comma separated values of the constructor. So the first item is going to be the year. So let's make that 2022. And then the month. And we're going to make it 8 here. Months are a little bit weird with the JavaScript constructor, and they index from 0. So 0 is going to be January, 1 is going to be February, 2 is going to be March, and 8 then is going to be September. Weird, hey? Okay, and then everything goes back to normal when we mark our day of the month. Don't ask me why they did it, but that's how they did it. So let's make that 15. Then after that, we want the hour. So we're going to want to start our event at 10 a.m. and the minutes. So we want to make it at 10:30 a.m. here. We can make it even more finely grained and make it into seconds and milliseconds, but we don't need that at the moment, and they're optional items. Cool, so we've got our start date. So how do we create our end date? Let's say we want to make our event last 30 minutes. So we need to extend our current time by 30 minutes. So let's make another constant variable, and we'll call that creatively end date. And we're going to create a new date again. This time inside our date constructor, we're going to use the start date, and we're going to get its time in milliseconds. So we're going to use the get time method here. That will be a big string of time data starting from the time epoch. And now we've got our start date as time, now we can add in another 30 minutes. Now we need to divide our 30 minutes into seconds and then into milliseconds. So let's start by adding 1,000 milliseconds and multiply that by 60 seconds and then multiply that by 30 minutes. Oh, and over here, we'll make sure we add all this together. That will create our end date to be the start date plus 30 minutes. And let's hit enter. Now, to make sure everything is working okay so far, we'll just console log that. And we'll type in start date. end date, hit save, and run. Cool. So you can see in our execution log, our start date is September 15th, 2020, starting at 10:30 a.m. And I'm in Australian time zone, GMT plus 10. And then 30 minutes later on September 15th, 2020, at 11 a.m., we have our end date. Perfect. Everything's working well. Cool. Let's get rid of that console log for now. So the next thing we need to do is set our calendar event. This is going to be a constant variable again, and we'll call this one calendar. We're going to use the calendar app class here. And there's two ways of getting our calendar. If we just want our default calendar, we can use the get default calendar. And that'll be your primary calendar that you have on your personal account. For us, we want a specific calendar. And to do this, we can use the get calendar by ID. Okay, so where do we get this ID from? Jump over to your calendar. And for us, I want to use this tutorial calendar here to add my calendar event to. And you can see these three vertical ellipses. We're going to click on those and then click on settings and sharing. And then scroll down until we get to this calendar ID here. And this will be our calendar ID. So select that and go back to our Google Apps scripts. And in double quotation marks inside our get calendar ID, we're going to add the ID. So now that we've got all our variables and we've selected our calendar, we can now create the event. So let's go const event equals. Now, why am I making a variable out of this instead of just creating the event? Well, once the event is created, we actually get into that particular event. So we can look at it and log certain parts of the information of that event, which will be handy. So now let's grab the calendar and then select create event. And inside our create event, there's two ways of doing this. First, we'll do the easy approach, and I'm just going to hit enter so we can put things on new lines for ease. And it's asking us to add in a title. Well, we've got a title variable we created above, and then we want a start time. For us, I think we made that as our start date. Let's just click off there. Yes, start date, which is fine. And then we want the end date variable, which is the end time that they've seen here. Cool, so that's got our event. And let's just also log a few things here. So we'll say console.log, and let's log our event.getID. So this will be the unique ID of the event, and the event.getTitle. So this will just help us to know that we've got the correct event, and that will be this integrating the PAX calendar globally title here. And then let's also log the event.getDateCreated. So when we created the event, not the actual start of the event, might be handy. And let's get the event.getOriginal calendar ID. So it's going to be this, should be this calendar ID here once it's been created. Okay, let's hit save now. And if I haven't made an error, it should be running. So let's hit run. And we'll review our permissions. Cool. So this is our calendar event. This is our title. Yep. This was the date that we added it. So it's Friday the 9th. Yep, that's correct. And this is the original calendar ID. Cool. Everything seems to be working there. Let's go over and check our calendar now. And you can see now our calendar event has been added. Let's click on it to have a look. Got our time and our title for our calendar. That's great. Let's hit X to close. And we'll go ahead and delete this one for the time being. And let's take this up a notch. So this was the very basics of what we need to do to create our calendar event, but we can go one step further. Now the create event method can also take a optional options parameter. So let's go ahead and add that to the bottom. And we also need to make this variable. So let's go back up to the top here in our variable list here, and we'll say const options. And that's going to be equal to an object with our curly braces here. I'm going to hit enter and put everything on a new line, make it neat and pretty. So we can add 4 different options. So a description of our calendar event, the location where the event's going to be held, the guests that we want to add, and whether or not we want to send invites. So let's go ahead and do that. So the first thing we can add is the description. We can use some very minimum HTML to style out the description here. So let's just use some backticks on this. And just for our first line, let's put in a paragraph tag and say, discuss EVil plan to integrate the 28-day, and then we want a link. Now we can add a link here with a href equals, and then double quotation marks, and we'll put in a Wikipedia link here, https://en.wiki.org/pax_calendar. And close those double quotation marks, and then close a href and put a label in there, PAX calendar. And then close our A tag into the global time system. And close our paragraph tag. And we'll just add a new line here. And of course, because it is an evil plan, we need to add an evil laugh. And let's just add some font to that, a font color to our evil laugh. I'll make that a crimson red just to show our level of villainy. And we'll make it bold. And we'll simply laugh villainously with a couple exclamation marks to really punctuate the point. Cool, let's close our bold. Let's close our font. And let's close our paragraph tag. There. I think we've highlighted a fair few of the HTML that we can use in our description there. Nice. Okay, so that's our description. So the next item in our object is going to be the location. And this time our location is going to be 2130 Fulton Street. And on a new line, we'll say San Francisco, comma, California, 94117-1080. There. What's the address? A weird reference to the PAX calendar. I told you, uber nerdy. Okay, so the next thing we can now do is add in our guests. So for us, we have one other person in our evil plan, and this is our tester at yagi-san@today.com. Now, it doesn't have to be the same person in the domain. It can be another person in a different domain or a @Gmail account. And if you want to add in another person, you just separate each email by a comma. Cool, let's hit enter. And the last thing we can do is decide whether or not we want to send an email invite to this calendar. So send invites. So we've got send invites, and this is a Boolean, so either true or false. So yes, we want to send an invite, so that's going to be true. Okay, so that's all our extra options there. We can't add any more options at this stage. However, once the event has been built, we can add a few other extra things here that you might find important. So let's just go after our event here And remember, we've returned our event, so we can type in event and dot, and we can add email reminder. We can add an email reminder, you can add an SMS reminder, and you can add notifications. But let's just add an email reminder. And we can add in the amount of minutes before the event. So let's say 60 minutes before. So we can also make sure that our guests don't modify the event. So we can go event and set guests can modify, and that's a Boolean, and we want to say no, so false. And because we want to keep our evil villainous plan secret, we also want to make sure that that tester isn't able to invite others. So set guests can invite others? No. Cool. Let's go ahead and hit save and now run. Okay, so there's no errors and we've got the same console logged information that we logged first time. So let's now head over to our calendar and see if our event has appeared. Yep, there it is. Let's give it a click. And now because we've added all the extra items and locations, we can see that we've got a Google Meet that's appeared there, which is great. And a join by phone option here, which has also appeared. Fantastic. We've got our address here. We can see it's all been put in one line. All right, no worries. Let's go back. We don't need to return anything by a new line then, so we can delete that. We've learnt something there. Cool, and hit save. And we've got our test user who's appeared here. And then we've got the title. So the first paragraph was this, and it's got our link to the PAX calendar. So if I click on that, that'll open up to the PAX calendar Wikipedia page. And we've finally got our evil laugh and our notification here. Now, if we check out our test user, so I'm just going to head over to the test users account so you can see. So I'm the test users account here. So you can see the event has been added. Also in the email, you can see that they've got the event that's been emailed to them. And if we click on things, you can see all the event details for them in the test users account. Okay, let's head back to my primary account again. Nice, and close that. Okay, so that's all you need to do to add an event to a Google Calendar using Google Apps Scripts. If you enjoyed this tutorial and want to see more on this topic, please hit that like button so I know what to create in future. And if you want to get more tutorials on Google Apps Scripts, Google Workspace, and all things Google, hit that notification bell. Really helps with the algorithm and you get an update when the next tutorial comes out. Until next time.